I'm going to call us to order, and I'd like to start the meeting by, if you'd all join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we just returned from executive session where we discussed strategy with respect to collective bargaining with all unions, excluding police and fire, and to discuss strategy with respect to non-union personnel for COVID premium pay. And on item number 2, we discussed conduct strategy with respect to negotiations with non-union personnel and town manager. And now we are going to discuss the reorganization of the select board. So, welcome to our new select board member, Scott Zielinski.
Thank you.
Great to have
Appreciate
you.
it.
And we had a great run with Megan, but she had to move on, and now you're going to take over her spot.
Literally.
Yep. Literally. So we have had a kind of a tradition as of late of chairs serving 2-year terms, and I think Doug Jones, was Doug Jones the first to start it? I'm not sure, but Megan also did that, and I'm willing to do that if the board is so inclined to have me do that. I'd also be happy to consider if you don't think a year is enough and it's time for somebody else to give it a try. I think Nancy Taylor is a capable chair if she's interested in the job, but I would, before I make any motions or make any statements, I would be happy to solicit the input of the board for their feelings about the 1-year versus a 2-year type of term. Anybody have anything to?
No, well, no, certainly there have been 2-year terms served several times in the last 10 years, certainly. So that, I don't see that as a problem. And there's some benefit in that, you know, after a year, you pretty much got it down as to what the routines are and working with our town staff. So I think there's some benefit in having some experience.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I do think that it's good to change it up sometimes. And I would like to nominate Nancy as chair of the select board,
Okay.
if she's willing to take that nomination.
I'd second that.
I'll accept the nomination. Thank
Okay.
you.
All those in favor of having Nancy be the chair?
Aye.
I'm willing to.
Aye.
Good.
Excellent.
Thank you. I think.
Thank you, Nancy. And we also should be discussing our committee assignments.
I think we need, I think we
Oh,
need
excuse me,
a
sorry.
vice chair. So I would nominate Anjali Scott Price to be my vice chair.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks.
Great. Ladies are taking over.
We're taking over.
You know that's going in the paper, Doug, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, board, and I will do my very best to serve the board and the town really well.
Great.
So the first, does anyone have any proclamations? I don't believe that we have any in our packet.
Do you have any proclamations?
How about recognitions?
Well, I'd like to recognize and comment that we have really good quality staff, department heads, employees. You know, the town is in a tumultuous time right now, and I just want the town employees to know that we respect and appreciate your service, and especially during this difficult time where we're going to be going through some changes at the top here, but that's mostly impactful to us. And I think I have every confidence that Assistant Acting Town Manager Peter Johnson-Staub will do an excellent job. He's already shown that he's fully capable of doing the job. So I just want to put that out there, that there's no big plan to make big changes around town. The only change was the dynamic between the town manager and the select board wasn't working, and that's the reason. It wasn't because the town is broken. It's certainly functioning very well. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, if I could just follow on that very briefly. First of all, thank you, Doug, for saying that. I know you mean it, and I think it means a lot to the staff to hear that from the board. And I just want to echo the comment. You know, it does cause some anxiety when this sort of transition takes place at the top, and I've certainly done my best to try to assure the department heads that they have my confidence and that they're doing a terrific job, and I really appreciate the board saying that publicly, so thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. And other recognition, do board members have a particular recognition that they'd like to make for any?
Well, I guess I should mention that yesterday I attended the Eagle Court of Honor for Logan Moniz, and it was really quite an inspiring, he's a very mature young man, and his comments and his acceptance were pretty impressive.
Great.
So anyway, I just, on your behalf, attended it and read the proclamation that we all issued.
Right, thank you for that. Any other recognitions, or we move to announcements? Or Nancy, you're in charge, so
I was just going to ask the
let you go.
question, I think you're supposed to hand me the gavel,
Yes, ma'am.
and I'm waiting patiently to use this thing.
All right.
All right, so let's start with reports. Beach Committee update.
Good evening. Maggie Clayton, Beach Superintendent. The Beach Committee and I discussed, and I felt that I should share the hiring process update. We are making our way to prepare for a fully functional season to the best of our ability. And we've already had 4 days worth of interviews for new hires, both in the parking attendant sector of our department and lifeguards. We are intentionally hiring extra parking attendants to accommodate, once again, the sunset hours at Old Silver Residence Lot and the Chappaquoit Beach sticker parking lot, as well as staffing parking lots in the event that we might not have lifeguards. Those numbers are obviously not final, and we are continuing to accept applications. In addition to our per diem sublist, which I instituted as a lifeguard supervisor about 5 years ago, we added an opportunity for returning staff to come back as a part-time employee. So rather than a 5-day-a-week scheduled shift or no guaranteed hours substitute per diem list, they will commit to 2 to 4 shifts a week. That's a way for us to retain our experienced staff and understand that they continue to grow and move in their future career opportunities with internships or other employment such as that. So I'm happy to field any questions that the board has. We have another day of interviews tomorrow for lifeguards. And we are instituting a additional session of the lifeguard training course, which will be intensive the first week of work, allowing anyone who is 15 can take the course, but anyone who is 16 and passes the course on that Friday will be eligible to join the staff and fill out payroll paperwork to begin work as soon as Saturday, July 2nd.
I have one question.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Yes, was there any luck with the hiring any of the lifeguards from Bourne as they canceled their program?
So we did reach out to both the recreation director and the Bourne schools to try and forge a connection and say, short commute, still an opportunity to use your certification. I don't know if any of our interviews that are slated for tomorrow are coming from Bourne. I would have to double check those applicants.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just how do we stand in terms of applications at this point?
So the application numbers do not necessarily match the hiring numbers. We had over 48 parking attendant applicants, and that has turned into 25 new hires. The lifeguard applicants stand at 26, I believe. And so far, that's 10 new hires, but we have another day of interviews.
Thank you.
Madam Chair? Yes.
Go ahead.
Has there been any correspondence with Joint Base Cape Cod with respect to their dependents or with these jobs posting?
I don't know of specific outreach to Joint Base Cape Cod, Mr. Zelinski, but we have been promoting our positions with flyers, the Rave Smart 911 system, the town website, and the beach managers cross-Cape meeting for sharing. No one has any extras to share, but that's the goal.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Maggie. Barbara Schneider?
I just want to add that in addition to everything Maggie's done and listed, we are doing some social media campaigning on Fabulous Falmouth by simply reminding people that lifeguards come in all sizes and ages. And we're encouraging teachers who might want to earn a little extra money during the summer, they too can get certified in that day, that Monday after school ends, and take on even part-time work during the summer. So we're hoping that people can start to think a little differently. This isn't only about high school and college age, and we're certainly hoping that that plants a seed and maybe we get somewhere with that too. We are not giving up. We want to see all 10 beaches staffed fully, and that is going to be our goal until such a time as we have to say we didn't make it, but we're going to keep trying.
Thank you. Let me just back up to one piece on announcements. We are looking to set the date for a hearing on the removal of the town manager, but that date has not been established as of tonight. Public comment. Public comment may be made on routine matters not on the agenda this evening. Comments are limited to 2 minutes. Please introduce yourself. Since the matter has not been included on the agenda, the Board of Selectmen may not, or the Select Board, may not participate in discussion of the topic. It is not appropriate to use public comment as a period to comment on any person's reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health, disciplinary matters, or civil or criminal charges. Comments about job performance and decisions made are permissible. Anyone here for public comment? No? Okay. We will, I'm sorry. Sure.
Why is Julian getting fired? We had no input. We pay him. So, I mean, I think we should evaluate him. You guys can't avoid fellow board members.
Thank you for your comments.
No problem. I just would like to know why. If you can email me.
Okay, town manager's preliminary report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To begin with the public hearing, you have Timber Bowling Alley is seeking to add 2 additional lanes to their existing bowling alley license. The hearing has been posted properly for this evening, and the staff review of the application did not identify any concerns. On your agenda as well, you have committee reports, which are self-explanatory. The accessible play space is on your agenda for tonight, and Kathleen Haynes is here from the Disability Commission to describe to you the park as sort of a reminder. This is something that the board has heard about and endorsed in the past, but primarily the purpose for tonight's discussion is for the board to provide some direction to staff about the potential location for that site. There was a prior vote of the Select Board to place this facility at the Davisville Road, so-called Emerald House properties. And I know Kathleen wants to talk to you about an alternative site that she's hoping we might be able to move on more quickly. As with any land use decision, there are a lot of considerations and details that go into that, which I will save for that agenda item. Also on your agenda tonight, we will be again discussing the policy for disposition of items valued at less than $10,000. And Town Council Maura O'Keefe and I have worked on crafting actually 2 policies to address this. And Ms. O'Keefe has consulted with the Inspector General, and has the result of that are these two policies that are before you. And I will say, by way of preview, that the Inspector General has confirmed that we can craft a separate policy for firearms that allows some more flexibility in terms of how the board may wish to craft a policy to dispose of firearms as a unique item, both with respect to our disposal options are limited. We can't hold an auction. We're not licensed to sell guns. But also as a public policy matter. And I would note that we're carving new territory here. This isn't a clearly established aspect of the procurement law that has been decided upon, or there's no written guidance on it from the state. We're confident that we have a policy that will stand up to muster, and I know Ms. O'Keefe is willing to defend it, and so we're pleased with the policies that we've drafted for your consideration for tonight. Hand in hand with that, of course, is an update on the status on procurement of police department weapons and the disposal of the surplus rifles that has been discussed. And that is something of a complicated matter. We do have an existing purchase order. The new rifles have been delivered, although they are still in their boxes. And while technically it may be reversible because we do not have a signed contract, it is going to be problematic for us, and I am recommending that we go ahead with the procurement as it was put forth in the purchase order, which does include the trade-in of the existing rifles. And you do have a memo in your packet from Powderhorn, which is the supplier. They were the low quote for providing the new weapons and for trading in the surplus rifles. They have committed to selling those rifles only to members of law enforcement. And Chief Dunn has taken an informal poll of his officers, and we do have enough interest just within the Falmouth Police Department among the police officers to purchase all of the rifles that are being traded in. So that's the preview for your for that agenda item. I'll skip ahead now to the Falmouth Housing Corp application for $100,000 from the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund, of which the board are the trustees. This is for an existing single-family home that is 51 Esker Place. It is currently an affordable unit, but the deed restriction is subject to expiration, and so this is a request that would secure the affordability of this unit in perpetuity. And I am recommending approval of that. The consent agenda items, the staff review of licenses did not identify any concerns. The donation from Kane Productions is related to a planned photo shoot that was canceled at the last minute after a pretty significant amount of staff time was spent corresponding with the firm to work out logistics. So that was Phyllis in our office, and the police department as well spent quite a bit of time trying to work out this photo shoot that ultimately was canceled, and they were kind enough to make a small donation in recognition of that. And that concludes my report. I'll have some supplemental comments at the end.
Thank you.
If anybody's waiting for the consent agenda.
I think I will before we get into the hearings.
Right.
But I think we should move forward and look at committee interviews. So we have 4 positions open on the Commission on Disabilities, 1 vacancy with a term until 6/24, 2 vacancies until 6/25, and 1 unexpired term until 6/23. We have 2 applicants. We have Rosemary Gagnon and Diana Moda. Is Rosemary here? Come on up. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in this committee?
I've been in town for about 40 years. I taught special needs for 20. I work for a company called Living Independently Forever, which is folks with physical disabilities, intellectual, developmental. So I'm familiar. I kind of want to try to help out and get some good stuff going for people that need different things.
Excellent. And where were you a special education teacher?
I worked at Upper Cape Tech.
Great. Any questions from the board?
And then Cape Cod Collaborative after that.
Oh, you were at the collaborative.
I was.
I have no questions. I thought the information in the packet was sufficient. I'm happy to have you on the committee.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll entertain any nominations.
Oh, I'd be happy to nominate Rosemary Gagnon for the term expiring June 30th of 2024.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. Thank you. Okay, Diana,
Hello.
tell us a little bit about you and your interest in this commission.
Well, I've always taken care of people that have had disabilities, and I had to stop because I was tired of the abuse and the neglect. So if I can get on this commission and advocate for them and get what they need, I will. Done. Thank you.
Hold on, don't go anywhere. Any questions from the board, just
None.
in case?
None.
No, it's for us to ask the question.
Yeah,
Right.
go ahead.
Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I do have one question.
Yeah.
And it's going to be regarding your interaction with other committee members.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to consider their views and, be patient?
I was trying to avoid this, but Doug, I'm perfectly capable of acting normal. I'm not crazy, okay? And I want to tell you something right now. I can talk to anybody. People like me. I don't judge anybody, and I treat everybody with dignity and respect. Does that answer your question, Doug?
It does, and that's going to
Okay.
be
Thank you.
important if you want to be
Doug?
on the committee.
Thank you. Any further questions? Can I entertain any nominations? Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, I move that we appoint Diana Moda to the Commission on Disabilities for a term expiring June 30th, 2023.
Second.
I've got a nomination and a second. All those in favor?
Give it a try.
Ready?
Nay. 3-2. You're on the committee. Welcome aboard. Right. Is there anyone here in the audience that has their application listed under the consent agenda? Okay, why don't you come up for a minute? You are?
My name is Devin Matart. I am representing Timber.
Oh, that's for the
Tim.
extra 2 lanes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question then.
No, you're,
No, you're right.
No,
Oh,
you're okay.
My apologies.
So the reason the chair's asking is because...
But you're under a public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
You're not under the consent agenda.
Okay.
We're just a little bit early, so I was going to ask anybody who is under the consent agenda to speak so that they didn't have to wait.
Okay. My
Okay.
apologies.
Not a problem. Are you expecting anyone else to come for your public hearing?
No.
Okay, then let's do it right now. Come right back up.
Is it okay that we're 5 minutes early on that?
I believe it is if we don't have anyone else who is here to represent the applicant. I'm assuming we can start 5 minutes early?
You should wait until 7:30.
Okay. All right, we will wait 5 minutes.
Okay, great.
Sorry,
No worries.
poor guy. Yeah, you guys let me know that.
You want to move it?
I think we're going to move the consent agenda, and I'm going to read the licenses and see if the board chooses to hold any of them. Application for a new common victualler license, Shiverick Cafe and Bar, located 285 Main Street, Falmouth. Application for a special one-day wine and malt liquor license, Woods Hole Historical Museum, 80 Church Street, Saturday, 6/25/2022. Application for a special one-day Wine and Malt Liquor License Food Truck Festivals of America, Cape Cod Food Truck and Craft Beer Festival, Cape Cod Fairgrounds, Saturday, 8/6/2022. Application for a special one-day wine and malt liquor license, Shipwrecked Cornhole Tournament, Shipwrecked and Heights Hotel parking lot, Saturday, 6/11/22. Application for a special one-day wine and malt liquor license, Shipwrecked Road Race After Party, Shipwrecked and Heights Hotel parking lot, Sunday, 8/21/22. Take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Administrative orders, since I still have time. Vote to accept a donation in the amount of $335 from Kane Productions to the Conservation Department donation account.
I do have just one quick question. Is there, just curious, is there a reason why they chose the Conservation Department for this specific donation?
You know what, I'm not sure about that. They were going to be on conservation, through near a conservation area for the proposed shoot, so I don't know if it was related to the mission of the company. I did not hear what their reason was.
Maybe they felt like they had used some of their time and help them out on that.
Well, I move approval with appreciation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. All right, I'm going to read the notice, the public notice of a hearing. Notice is hereby given under Chapter 140, Section 177, 178, 179, and 180 of the general laws as amended that Town Hall Partners, LLC, doing business as Timber, has applied for an amendment to the bowling alley license located at 23 Town Hall Square, Falmouth, Mass. A hearing will be held in the Select Board Meeting Room, Falmouth Town Hall, on Monday, May 23rd, 2022, at 7:30 p.m. on the above application. And I believe that this was published in the Falmouth Enterprise, although it doesn't say so and it doesn't give a date.
That's correct.
All right, give me 2 more minutes and we'll get you started.
I think since the applicant is here, it must be close enough, but I'll defer to town council.
Well, Town Council said 7:30. We'll give it another minute and we'll start.
All right.
Why don't you come up? Could you introduce yourself and you can...
I can again. For the record, my name is Devin Matart. I am the label general manager of Timber. I'm here representing them for this amendment. Would you like me to explain?
Go ahead.
Okay. So we are asking to amend the bowling alley license from 10 to 12. The original license was under the wrong listing of 10. The original bowling alleys consist of 12 bowling lanes. We're just asking for that change to be made.
Easy enough.
I've been in there a few times. It had 12 lanes.
Correct, sir.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Anyone here from the public to speak to this?
I move we close the hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Report from the Falmouth Cultural Council. As you know, and as is stated on the agenda, you'll have up to 15 minutes for your presentation.
I assume you don't want me to read the report to you.
You can
Okay.
read parts that you want to focus on, highlight important things, however you want to do it.
All right, so the Falmouth Cultural Council is one of 329 cultural councils across the state. We are funded by the Mass Cultural Council and regulated by both the Mass Cultural Council and the town of Falmouth.
Could you
We
just-
received in...
Did you introduce yourself? I'm sorry.
What?
Did you introduce yourself? Just so the
Oh,
folks
my
that
name's
don't-
Marilyn Rowland.
I know your name, but just so the folks that don't know you.
And pull the mic down just a bit so we can hear you better.
I'm chair of the Falmouth Cultural
Thank you.
Council. I have also brought Alice Kochimba and Jane Parhiella, who Alice is the secretary, and Jane is the previous chair and also the chair of our art market in the summer. So they might want to add something at some point. Okay, so what we get money from the Mass Cultural Council to distribute to local artists and organizations to do projects related to arts, sciences, humanities, interpretive sciences, and the humanities. They make applications through the Mass Cultural Council. We receive those applications, and we review them for relevance to the local community. Sometimes we get applications from afar, other parts of the state, but most of them are local, or the event will be local, even if the organization is coming in from elsewhere. And then we look at the funds that we have, and we divide it up among those applicants. As we stated here, we received in the fall of 2021, 34 grant applications totaling $28,808, of which we had $7,300 to distribute. So we had to evaluate those applications. One of the things we do as a local cultural council to increase our funds is to have the Falmouth Art Market during the summertime, and we raise about $2,000 each summer, which is added to the total. So we were able to give out not $7,300, but $10,458. And we felt that that was good. We would like more money, and as we pointed out in the application, we are going to be applying to see if we can have the town match those figures so that we can give out more money. These applications, there's a list of them on the second page of the report. The amounts of money that we're giving out are very small. The highest one is $750. The lowest one, I believe, is $178. And people have said to us, it's hardly worth applying for a grant for such a small amount of money. But we really do want to encourage, the list of things we've been able to support we think is very important. Music groups, museum exhibits, art exhibits, puppet shows, all kinds of things that either reduce the admission fee that the sponsoring organization is able to provide or eliminate it entirely. So we feel it's very, very effective. But we could do a lot more with a lot of money. We could do a lot more if we could raise that amount. We used to give out about $1,000. We are very successful in getting applications. Other cultural councils across the state don't necessarily receive as many applications as we do because we have a very active arts community and because we promote it. And so I think that we have a successful history. I know, Alice, do you want to say anything more?
You need to come to the mic, please, Alice.
That would be great, thank you.
And please introduce yourself when you get there.
I'm Alice Kuchimba, and I'm Secretary of the Falmouth Cultural Council. Thank you for your time and attention. The only thing I wanted to say is that there has been, because of the pandemic, a loss of, on average, according to Mass Cultural Council figures, 24 gigs for our gig economy cultural workers, an average of $10,000 of lost income. What we're hoping to do, there have been some letters we've received from local artists of different types who really have struggled because of the pandemic. We're looking to the town, through the town meeting in the fall, to help us make right those people who've lost that income. And we're really looking for the select board to take the lead to say the arts are part of a vital economy and that the time is ripe for some matching funds to make these cultural workers whole again. Thank you.
Jay? Questions from the board?
I have a question.
I just want to say one more thing, is that the art market is a separate entity underneath the Falmouth Cultural Council, which we invented. In, I think, 2006. It's been going on for a long time, and we've amassed some money that we hope to benefit the community. The art market charges a low fee to vendors, lower than most art shows, and we hire musicians to entertain the people. And we've found that's very effective in not only supporting the local arts community, but giving something back to the town. We applied for a special events application for the art market, and the town is charging us $2,000 for that special application fee, which is our entire profit for the summer. So we're hoping that some effort can be made to reduce that amount of money so that we can put more money back into the funding of groups through the Falmouth Cultural Council.
Okay.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dan.
Is there any ARPA funds that could be applied to this endeavor?
So that's a good question. There is some funding from ARPA that is very flexible for any municipal purpose. We would just need to look at anti-aid provisions and make sure that it passes muster with that. So that's something that I would be happy to explore with Town Council.
You need a vote from the board to support that work, or?
Well, I think we talked about potentially a select board agenda item to talk about ARPA funding generally, so perhaps that is an idea that we can discuss at that time.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think they need a vote to actually look into it, though.
Right.
However,
Mr. Patterson?
I just want to take the opportunity to thank the Falmouth Cultural Council for all of the activities and for all the people that you support, because it certainly does enhance our community tremendously. I know my children greatly appreciated when they were growing up here in Falmouth, and my wife and I, too, for that matter. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I would like to point out that we all work for nothing, and it's not only the giving out of the grants, but it's all year long, the record keeping. I'm sure you know all about that. The record keeping and making sure people get paid and making sure that the final reports are done, and making sure everything goes smoothly. So I think it's a good effort. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Okay, report on the Commission on Disabilities. Chair Kathleen Haynes is here, and Kathleen, you as well will have 15 minutes.
They do.
Really? Mine's on.
I don't think these microphones amplify in the room, do they?
No.
They should. When this is turned up, it should.
Okay.
So can you move that down for her?
So
How about you want to take one? There's an extra mic.
There you go.
How far does that?
Oh, this one's farther, I think.
you know what? We have a hand. We'll get it for free.
Well, I'm Kathleen Hughes, I'm chairperson of the Disabilities.
Well, he's going to get your
I
microphone.
know, I'm trying to project so they know who I am and say it a little fast.
Okay, well,
sorry about the math, but I'm a little bit.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Kathleen, you might be able to come up here and use this mic.
Oh, he's getting, yeah.
There, he has one.
Oh, never mind.
Gonna work for you in terms of your
Yeah.
paper?
Yeah, I'll have to check things. I know pretty much what I'm going to do. So I'll introduce myself again. Kathleen Haynes, Chairperson of the Commission on Disabilities. We have different initiatives going, and we have different views, I think, on what the Commission on Disability does.
Are you sure that mic's on?
It is.
Okay.
Okay. I'll bite it. So anyhow, the Commission on Disabilities doesn't set policies, they suggest things. We don't have money to make people's lives better. We do what we can in terms of finding initiatives that work for everybody in town that's disabled. So one of the biggest initiatives this year has been working with the Beach Committee and Maggie on providing moving mats for the beaches. So we have gone, since January, we've been working on how many mats there are presently, how many mats that Maggie could buy with the money the town meeting appropriated, and what the Commission on Disabilities would be able to appropriate. So we chose to spend up to $12,000. I presented that to Jen Mullen, who, excuse me, but she's very rude about my presenting it. I am not department chairperson, so I should not be presenting anything. And I explained to her, Maggie works full-time, plus does the beach, and I can help out by getting quotes or finding out the information on moving mats, then that's appropriate. So I did get some quotes, which she requested. One was under $10,000, which is a company that has dealt with the town of Falmouth before, which we got quotes for them. One was $10,900, and one was $12,000 some odd. $12,015. So obviously, they're going to go for a little bigger, so I'm happy that we could provide 5 mats that are 50 feet long, 5 feet wide and 50 feet long, that will help stock all of the beaches with what's already been bought, what Maggie has bought this year. All of the beaches should be able to have a moving mat that goes from the parking lot right to the water. And that's all 10 beaches. It excludes Google Park because Google Park is too steep right now to be able to move that. It would be too dangerous. So all the beaches will be perfectly able to accommodate wheelchair and other mobility disabilities at the beaches this year. And with the help of the beach committee, they're going to put handicap accessible picnic tables, porta potties that are handicap accessible. So we've worked together with them, and I think this year the beaches in Falmouth are going to be very inclusive, and it'll be very attractive to beachgoers who are disabled, both visitors and town people alike. So that has been like the big thing this year, making sure that that was accomplished, and we've done that. I think we got it under the gun. Hopefully by July 4th, the beaches will have the mats. It's just a matter of Jen ordering them and Maggie ordering them and having them paid for our account. So, and I should explain, the money that we have to appropriate, the $200 that somebody is fined for parking in Falmouth and handicap accessible spot comes to the Commission on Disabilities. So we can accumulate quite a bit of money per year. And right now, we have about $42,000 in our account thanks to the people who park. But it helped us with being able to accommodate different things. We provided money to the Commodores with the lift that they have now that goes to the press box, things like that. And we are open to different organizations who, the way the law reads with the money that we spend, it has to be able to help the greatest amount of disabled. So by using the money for the moving mats, that provides a greater number of disabled the ability to expand their horizons and be included in different activities. So like the lift for the press box, it allows interns who are disabled to be able to be scouts and whatever, be able to be in the press box who are disabled, where before they couldn't have that ability to be a disabled person who is able to be an intern. So the monies that we provide are for very important reasons. So we open it up to organizations in Falmouth who have disabled clients, whatever, who are looking for funds, who do things to help a good amount of disabled apply to us for a grant. And we can accommodate that up to a certain amount. We do only provide up to a certain amount at a time, which clearly was a different situation because it was a purchase that was going to affect a lot of people. So we did take a vote, and the whole commission wanted that money spent. So we do have the chance to spend more, but at smaller amounts. We sort of put a formula together how much was going to be spent per year. But that's the biggest thing. Sugar's Pond, we worked for Jen Constock. He called and gave me some videos to look at about what they were going to use for kayak for the disabled on Sugar's Pond. And we looked at different types of, it's hard to explain. It's sort of like a transfer bench that goes down the slopes, and a board, a piece will slide out, so a person who's disabled can lower themselves gradually to the board, and then can lift themselves from the bar right into the kayak and be able to go on Sugar's Pond.
We just approved one recently.
That's the one that we were looking at. So that was something the commission helped out initially to look at what would be the best type product. We also have been working with the town down with, not written with you yet, we're proposing that the town down do a self-study on what is accessible in Falmouth buildings, town-owned Falmouth buildings, and what isn't, and what should be to meet the ADA standards. A study was done many years ago. I have been told, and it's somewhere in the hands of the DPW. Whether it actually exists or not, I don't know, but we want to propose that a self-study be done, and provide you with documents on what the self-study is. And there are different grants that will help pay for the study to be done. The Mass Office on Disability has a study, a grant that is done every year that you can apply to. Once the self-study is done, and if there are areas that need to be corrected in the town, there are further grants that will help pay for those updates. So the list I gave you in the packets, they tell you exactly what needs to be up to code and what isn't, and what is up to the town. That's an important initiative that we'd like to see the town undertake. We understand it costs money to do so, and we recommend looking for grants and such to do it. And it would include hiring a consultant. And I gave you a consultant's name that happened to contact me, and it was an example of what that type of consultant can do. It's not a recommendation for consultant by any means, but it shows what a consultant can do for the town and getting a self-study done and how important it is. And it's just little things that we've done. Eversource, we're hoping that telephone poles will be removed on Palmer Ave, that will make life easier for people like me going around telephone poles on the sidewalk. That's impossible right now. God knows about that. The play space is a big item which we will discuss when I get done. We have had complaints from people who have handicapped vans that the striping in the handicap parking is not wide enough. They're 5 feet, which is what ADA requires you that access for it. But Woodbury has nicely improved that. He made it 8 feet at the senior center parking. The rec center parking is going to have them. They're going to wipe out the lines that are there now and put new striping in, so the handicap vans will have an 8-inch wide loading zone. And he hopes to be able to do this with town parking here at the town hall and other town spaces that parking parking strip just isn't wide enough for the person coming out of the van, get down there, you have to be able to turn to be able to access the sidewalk from there. So 8 feet is going to be the new thing in Falmouth. We will be leading the charge. And those are the important things. We did do some work with people at Liaison. They contacted the Commission on Disabilities. They were able to get new signs put up, new striping done, new, the wall was taken out so that the mowing mats can come to the parking lot and then go down to the water. But we had actually a new section of wall that was put in just recently, actually, in the last couple of years. The Jim Grady's crew went down there, put the signs up, got the wall removed, drained the parking, and Nancy is ready to go. They have these clams. All the nice little ladies down there. So those are things, people contact me all the time with different things that they need done, and the commission looks at what they need, and we find a way to solve it. It just happens, I know Jim Grady well enough to know what's in his purview, and things get done a lot because of Jim Grady. So a shout out to Jim and that highway department for everything they do. So.
Thank you, Kathleen. Questions from the board?
Just to clarify, did you say that the mats are ordered?
No, the mats have to be ordered. I just presented the 3 estimates as Friday.
Okay.
Actually, I gave Jen the last one today.
Okay.
But I gave her the one for $90,000, less than $10,000 Friday, and now Maggie has to order those.
I see. Okay.
Maggie and Jim Brady will take care of that.
Okay.
And then our funds will come up.
All right, thank you.
And thank you for your work, Kathleen, on the commission. I've been lucky enough to see it firsthand. It's been hard. I haven't been to the last 2 because of work.
We had hands a couple of the lack of quarter, which one
Yes.
my mom passed away.
Yes.
We need to build the commission as much as possible because when one person is out, they go to
The quorum goes, right.
And with Denise COVID meeting, we now do not have an ADA coordinator in the town.
Right.
So that spot, if we had not just put 2 people on, we would not be meeting.
At all, right.
She's a voting member of the commission.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We will move on to the accessible play space site selection. Be doing that.
See if you're paying attention.
I'm involved in this. This is my baby. I have one question for Peter. I was told Friday that the affordable housing did not go at Emerald property. Is that true?
So there are 2 parcels of land. There are 2 different parcels on Davisville Road, 67 and 81 Davisville Road. And the 81 Davisville Road, now I'm, you know what, I can't remember which is which.
81 is where we want to go.
So the parcel that has the actual Emerald House on it,
It's 67.
that does have Article 97 protections on it. So that would require, it's correct that affordable housing could not be built on the parcel that has Article 97 protections. It was taken for open space and recreation. So that would require a town meeting vote and relief from the state legislature if there was going to be housing on that particular parcel.
Right.
So it's not, so it's the same restriction that applies to the other parcel that you've brought forward, 0 Sharon Ave has those same protections. So that's, that's one of the issues for the feasibility study and for the board to consider is whether at the Davisville Road properties, whether you want to limit affordable housing to the parcel that has no Article 97 restrictions on it, which would make for a quicker and easier process, or if you want to contemplate housing on both parcels. So that's among the issues to be determined. And if I may, to just continue the conversation, and then I know, I think Kathleen may want to speak to the 0 Sharon Ave parcel as well. But just in terms of context for this discussion, again, the Select Board has Previously, the initial proposal from the Disability Commission and Kathleen was to put the accessible play space at the Davisville Road properties. I think it may have crossed over and had a portion on each of the two parcels, if I remember correctly. And the board may recall that we had a conversation about a master plan, and that this is almost 9 acres of land. It was identified by staff as the best opportunity for affordable housing, and we talked about having a feasibility study done and having some community engagement to determine how best to use this precious town-owned land for this combination of purposes, which is the accessible play space, affordable housing, and community gardens. We do have some feedback from an engineer that was retained through a partnership with Mass Housing Partnership, and we are poised to begin community engagement on the housing elements and the master plan for that parcel. We now have our housing coordinator on board, and she's going to be instrumental in guiding us through that process, along with a consultant, a community engagement consultant, because we really want to make sure that that the community makes informed choices, not just based on what staff says or a handful of the abutters say, but really looking at the big picture and all of the community needs that we might want to be addressing at this parcel.
But we're not there yet, is what I'm hearing you
We're
say.
about to start the community engagement to look at, what's the size and scope of the housing? Do we want to limit it to one parcel? Do we want to consider going through that difficult process to lift the Article 97 restrictions on one of the two parcels?
But you should also make it clear that once, if you do that restriction, lift the restriction, you have to sell that land to be developed. The town will not be developing that. So you also have to go to town meeting to get the vote to sell the land for consultant, a developer to build it, and that came out of you.
Yes, so the way that the town would pursue affordable housing under any scenario on any land would be to issue an RFP, and in all likelihood, staff will be recommending a sale of the land to a private owner to develop and own the housing. That's correct.
And that you've already taken a vote for the play space to be over there. So you would be taking away play space that the disabled children in Falmouth need. But housing, which I totally agree with, but you'd be selling the land and you'd be taking away the land that you've already voted for the Commission on Disabilities and inclusive play space to use.
So,
that was voted by the select board.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Sure. So certainly, I am not proposing, staff are not proposing to eliminate the accessible play space at these properties. What I am suggesting that we should study is how best to place both of those uses at these properties. So bear in mind, part of the process is there are now 2 parcels of land. Those parcels could be reconfigured in myriad ways, because the town.
John, we had a survey, and it was determined that the only space that was really good for the play space was at the age 81 Davisville, because that was the flat section. The housing, going back the way you wanted to originally, and that's going around, where our architect put a road in, and it was never acknowledged, so that you go behind where the play space is. That was done, and then I was told the housing advocates don't want the play space in the front yard. And I heard that at a select board meeting. That was said in a select board meeting by a select board member. I don't remember which one, but it said that that's why the play space has been shifted and is nowhere. So that's why I went and was investigating properties that the play space could go on, which is how we got to Sharon Ann Lane, or Sharon Lane, Kathy Ann Lane and Sharon, which is property the town owns. But there's no way to put a road in there.
So when you're looking at creating a master plan, you'll be considering what you have from the Commission on Disabilities in terms of where the play space, the safe play space would fit. Am I correct?
Right. So my understanding of what we are investigating is we are pursuing the directive of the Select Board from a couple of years ago where they said pursue all three of these uses. So that's what we are proceeding to do. So as far as I'm concerned, placing the accessible play space and affordable housing on these two parcels is the direction that we've been given, and until we hear further from, or otherwise from the board, that is what we will continue to pursue. Now, what will be feasible at the end of the day? You know, is it possible that the result of the feasibility comes back and says you can't do both, you have to do one or the other? Maybe, but that's why we do the study. And again, it won't be for, you know, it won't be for the acting town manager to decide. It will be for the Select Board to decide. And this may be a good opportunity for me to mention as well. I think it's important that the Select Board hears from the Recreation Committee with respect to the location of this accessible play space. It is essentially a park, and that is, you know, certainly within the domain of the Recreation Committee to advise the Select Board. Not that it's their, you know, not that the Recreation Committee, they're an advisory committee to the Select Board. So I suggest you may want to seek their input on what is the best location for this accessible play space, again, with the technical information that we bring forward.
Let me just say something. Could we not use the term accessible play space and inclusive intergenerational play space? We have accessible play spaces around town, technically, because a child can get in there even though the surfacing is wrong. But it is an inclusive intergenerational play space. There's a difference between inclusive and accessible.
Thank you.
Happy to do that. Yep.
Thank you. That sort of rubs me wrong. It's not correct, because inclusive means a whole lot more accessibility for the children than just accessible. All right. But has the study been done? Mass, whatever we're supposed to do.
So we have an engineering feasibility study that is sort of one of the building blocks. So a lot more work needs to be done to determine.
I would like to have been told that the study was done, since I'm the conduit between all this, and that there was a chance to do that instead of spending a lot of time researching different properties, like with sharing a T-ticket that is essentially not usable because we can't put a road in there without taking property back in the domain and buying it, which is a bigger expense to the town than the play space in every place. Right?
That may well be. As you know, you asked us to take a look at that property, and we did, you know, spend quite a bit of time. And what we found is that the access to the parcel on Sharon Ave is on a private road, and it is very narrow. And it appears that some private takings would be necessary to create the functional access that would be needed for that space. But it is a big chunk of land, so, you know, again, that's another sort of complicated policy issue for the board to take a look at. You know, what is the long-term vision for that piece of property? Perhaps it's conservation land, but if it's anything other than conservation land, then at some point we are looking at that expense to create access.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Patterson.
Can I just mention that a number of years ago, that parcel was looked at for affordable housing? And one of the things that they noted was that there was some concern that Natural Heritage actually had some control over that property for, you know, endangered species, and I don't recall what they were, but I just wanted to mention you might want to explore that as well, as that could be a fly in the ointment, so to speak.
I've also suggested another parcel that's owned by St. Patrick's that's behind the property that the town owns, that would have to be purchased, and there's a land and water grant up to $1 million that the state issues that would help appropriate to buy that. But I've always preferred Emerald. But it has been such a tumultuous process that it's ridiculous. you know, we were given a vote that the property where their old senior center was going to be the property, and that turned out to be negative. Then we were told Emerald House was going to be the perfect property, and we spent up to almost $40,000 to get it designed to do surveying and everything else. We've got copies of the place based on what it looked like, and it's sitting in my basement, rolled up in a file. It's never been used, never even been shown to the public, because nobody can agree on anything. I'd like a commitment that we're going to do this.
I would comment that I think maybe our vote was, maybe it was an error to have put this play space on 81. Maybe we should have put it right behind the Emerald House on 67.
The reason it wasn't was because the land goes down.
Yeah.
And the cost to level it was extensive. It's already, the way the layout is now, just play space is $1 million or more now because of building costs.
Mm-hmm.
To level the land out would be extremely expensive. That's why the 81 was chosen by the surveyor.
Mm-hmm.
And why it was designed the way it was, because it's really flat.
Right.
And that's the sticking point. I had no problem going behind. But the problem is the cost of loaning the land to be able to put the play space there.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll continue to work with the Commission on Disabilities as we move forward
Absolutely.
to find an appropriate space?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and, I think that's part of the, it's complicated. This piece of property and all of these uses combined does make for a complicated set of analysis and decisions. But I guess, one of the ways that I see us moving forward is to bring forward some options for how can we get all of these uses on these parcels, and what are the costs and trade-offs of the different allocations. Maybe we have an option that says you keep the play space where it was originally proposed and you put all the housing in back, and maybe you look at another option that flips it the other way around. And maybe it may well be that one of the considerations is, normally if we lived in a flat community with lots of land, we wouldn't dream of putting the play space in terrain that is going to make it very expensive. But maybe in the scheme of things, we say, you know what, even if it does double the cost, this is still the best site for the play space, and it's worth the investment to put it where it's more expensive. Again, it may go the other way around. Maybe the housing goes in the back, and we say, look, we could have saved, $1 million on the housing had we put it right on the street front. But we have competing priorities, and we want to do all of these things at these properties. So that's what the analysis and the community engagement is about.
Thank you, Kathleen, very much, and thank you for your work around this.
You're
It's frustrating to hear this, because there's no commitment that it's being worked out.
I feel as though the board is committed to it. I think it's the placement that continues to be a question. Am I correct?
Until you tell me otherwise, the direction from the board is to pursue all of these uses. Yep.
So can we make a thing here where I'm going to be kept in the loop finally, because we went over a year without anything, even though we were contacting Peter and nothing was being told to us. So I would like to have a commitment that we're going to work on this, not just put it in my file cabinet, in your file cabinet.
I think, Kathleen, you've heard the commitment. I think you've heard the commitment from the board, even though we can't tell you exactly where it's going to be. And I think you've heard a commitment from the acting town manager to continue to consult with you as they move through this process.
Because that is not what's going to happen.
Okay, and
For 5 years.
I think you have that
Going on
commitment.
for 5 years.
Yes, the process has been admittedly slow. You haven't been left out. The process has just been stalled because of, working through getting some funding for the feasibility analysis and getting that process started and the transition with the housing coordinator. But you have my commitment that we are going to move through a deliberate evaluation and community engagement process, and the Disability Commission will be a part of that.
Because we've never asked the town for a cent for this. And the only thing that we ask for the land, which is a big price tag, but we're willing to raise the fund, which is why we don't want to spend extra money to level out the land. So that's, so
Thank you, and thank you for your work, Kathleen.
Indeed.
Okay, we're going to move on to the discussion of Select Board policy for the disposition of items valued less than $10,000, and we have 10 minutes.
So you have in your packet a draft policy, and the draft policy, as I mentioned, it carves out a special case for firearms. So this policy for disposition of surplus materials, supplies, and equipment, at the very end of the policy in subsection E, addresses commodities like firearms that are treated uniquely in the marketplace. The surplus supplies may be disposed of in a manner consistent with the purposes of the Procurement Act, Chapter 30B, notwithstanding the provisions of this policy. So the policy itself, I think, is fairly straightforward. The surplus property is declared surplus by the department heads and the town manager in writing. The list of equipment is initially offered to town departments. Town manager then determines the value of the surplus equipment. The town manager determines that the surplus, if the town manager determines the surplus property has no resale value, it can be disposed of at the least cost to the town. For surplus property that has a resale or salvage value, the town manager may dispose of the property pursuant to any of the procedures set forth below, as may be appropriate under the circumstances, and those procedures are to advertise the sale on the town's website and/or a local newspaper, to use the surplus property as a trade-in credit toward purchase, to donate the surplus supplies to a government entity.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just signaling to Mr. Lowen that we've already approved the shipwrecked application on the consent. We had a moment before a hearing, so we took it out of order.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem. So the surplus property can be donated to government entities or charitable organizations, and in limited circumstances and in accordance with an articulated public policy reason for doing so, the surplus supplies may be destroyed.
Questions on the draft policy? Comments?
I think the first one is fine with me. Is there any comments from anybody else?
No, I'm pleased to see this. I think we've moved it along. I think it represents the will of a lot of them, of the citizens of this town.
Agreed.
So, you know,
So do I have a motion?
Well, I would, but I guess I have a procedural question. Does this have to be first presented in draft and then voted on at a subsequent meeting? I was just thinking maybe the fact that we've put it out there, we could actually hold a hearing where people could provide public comment at a later date. I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not trying to tell you.
It's a fair question. The Board of Selectmen, that's one of our things, that we set policy, and I don't know that we need to put it out in a regular form before we would vote it.
I don't believe there's, and town council can confirm if there is any legal requirement. I'm not aware of any legal requirement to do so.
Okay.
It has been a practice in the past when there's a policy being adopted that the policy be discussed and then an opportunity for public input and then adopted at a subsequent meeting. However, I do believe there was a prior draft policy.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, certainly it's at the pleasure of the board if you want to continue it again, but I think you could look at this as the second meeting addressing this policy.
And this particular one, to me, seems pretty straightforward. I don't know if any other board members have questions, but this to me this one's straightforward.
Well, I would be happy to move approval.
Second.
Can we take public discussion on it?
In a second?
Yes. I believe
So we
we
have
can.
it's been moved and seconded.
But we could hear if you wanted to.
Well, this is time for public comment.
I'm sorry?
I mean, this would be the appropriate time
Yes.
for public comment.
Yes. Yes, you can speak to this.
Just real quick, because
Oh, you have to please introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I will. Richard Doobie, Precinct 6. It just, Mr. Johnson-Staub, could you just go over the part about destruction of property because you were sort of interrupted?
Sorry about that. I was just
No
trying
problem.
to wave Mr. Lowen out and kind of made a distraction.
So in the proposed policy, it does allow for, in limited circumstances and in accordance with an articulated public policy, in accordance with an articulated public policy reason for doing so, the surplus supplies may be destroyed.
That's sort of confusing. What is the articulated policy, and how do you determine what can and cannot be destroyed? There's a stipulation that it can be destroyed, but then there's another thought says that it's an articulated policy. It seems to me that you have to have an articulated policy before you can vote on this.
So I'm going to ask Maura O'Keefe to comment on it. Before I do that, though, I just want to make sure that it was clear, because I sort of presented it out of sequence. I did mention earlier on, there is also another section of this policy that carves out firearms as a special case. So commodities like firearms that are treated uniquely in the marketplace may be disposed of in a manner consistent with the purposes of the Procurement Act. And with that, I'll let Maura O'Keefe comment.
So the policy is designed to grant town manager the ability to articulate that public policy, and it's going to depend a lot on what the supply actually is. There's going to be a different public policy purpose behind disposition of surplus in that manner to dispose of them, depending on what you're talking about. Is it a chair? Is it a firearm? Is it hazardous substances? The public policy reasons are going to vary, and that's why it's written as broadly as it is, to make the policy fit the circumstances. So here, as you move on to discussion of the next policy, you'll see that there is a public policy purpose that's articulated in the disposal of firearms policy that has been drafted in a way that reflects the conversation around this policy, these proposed policy over the last couple of months. And the driving public policy there for the firearms disposal policy is that this select board in the town has an obligation to do its best to maintain the health and safety of the residents of this town. And the other section of that public policy purpose is to make the best efforts that we can as a town to ensure that surplus firearms do not make their way into the hands of those who should not possess them. And it's those two public policy that drive this, it's that articulated policy that drives the ability either to destroy the surplus firearms or to make best efforts to sell them back into those who are ultimately qualified. Here, a preference to sell them back to law enforcement.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, good evening. Nan Logan, Precinct 1, and just want to precede this by saying thank you very much to our police department who solved a very difficult situation last week in North Falmouth. I think it's very impressive. The training paid off. Everybody, it came out as well as it could for a very difficult situation. Thank you very much. The question I have on this, and I'm so pleased to see that we've gotten to this point, I think it's very exciting. I just wanted to be clear about what it meant, the clause that says, with the preference to consideration that surplus firearms be sold back to active members of the Falmouth Police Department. Is that a requirement or an option?
So that is in the next policy. I don't know if I don't know if the board wants to talk about all the policies together, or if you want to hold that question for later. It also ties into the status update on the procurement and disposition of these weapons that precipitated this conversation.
So you'll be getting to that answer? Or is that?
Sure.
shortly.
Okay.
Yes.
Good, thank you very much.
So the question to the board is, do we want to deal with these two policies separately? Do we want to vote on the first policy, disposition of surplus materials, supplies, and equipment policy, and then consider the policy for the disposal of surplus firearms?
I recommend separately.
Separately, yeah.
And we have a motion and a second to accept the first policy, disposition of surplus materials, supplies, and equipment policy.
And I'm fine with it the way it is. It's,
So we'll take a vote. We have a first by, a motion to approve by Mr. Patterson, second by Ms. Scott Price. We'll take a vote.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay, now let's consider the policy for the disposal of surplus firearms.
So the policy for surplus firearms was briefly described by Ms. O'Keefe. Firearms, and I'm skipping over sort of the introductory paragraph here. Firearms of any value that can be legally purchased, owned, or possessed in Massachusetts by anyone who holds a Massachusetts fire identification card or license to carry, that are deemed surplus by the Chief of Police, may be destroyed in a safe and appropriate manner, or may otherwise be disposed of in a manner that assures that the surplus firearms will be resold to individuals who are qualified to purchase, own, or possess them under Massachusetts laws. What we've done here is, and I'll read the next paragraph in a moment, but we've carved out two different sections to deal with two different categories of weapons. One category of weapon is, for example, a standard pistol, and I'm not a gun person, so I'm not going to get into details or I'll get them wrong. But the first category is that category that, with the approval of the local chief of police, anyone who has an FID card or a license to carry can purchase that type of weapon. So that's the paragraph that I just read. And then there's a separate paragraph to deal with those weapons that are more restrictive. And we identify those as firearms that are subject to the so-called assault weapons ban or any other similarly restricted firearms under Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Sections 128, 131O, and 131M, as may be amended, that are deemed surplus by the Chief of Police, may be destroyed in a safe and appropriate manner or disposed of in a manner that assures the surplus firearms will only be sold to individuals who are qualified to purchase, own, or possess them under Massachusetts law, with a preference to consideration that the surplus firearms be sold back to active members of the Falmouth Police Department. That is a carefully crafted policy and wording to attempt to address the policy goals that have been articulated by the Select Board, and we've heard from many members of the community. It's not perhaps as clear as you might want it because there are some Second Amendment considerations. And I don't know if you want to have Attorney O'Keefe speak to those now or if you want to jump in with questions.
Can I ask a clarification, though? Because as you read it, you said may, and the written version says shall. Are deemed surplus by the Chief of Police shall be destroyed in a safe, appropriate manner, and it goes on to provide the other option.
So it's different for different sections, right? So in the first paragraph that I read, it's may, and in the second paragraph that I read, it's shall.
Okay, thank you, because I think you said may, and I
apologize if I misread.
Good. No, I'm quite happy with it as it says shall.
Go ahead. Is it Madam Chair or Dr. Chair? I'd say Dr. Chair.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
So with all of our policies, generally, we oversee them, so we are able to enforce them. And I'm wondering, how would we manage the potential enforcement of, for example, ensuring that these are resold to individuals who are qualified to purchase them? If we were to trade these in or do something with them, how do we ensure that this policy is followed? Or is it just we hope that it's followed?
Great question.
well, we have to trust our town manager to execute the policies of the board. And until such time as we feel that trust has been breached, we just stay the course, and he has the policy and the direction, and He's a professional, so he'll do what the policy indicates.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I wasn't privy to the beginning arguments because I was on the other side of the table, so I reserved my comments. These firearms fall under a pre-ban regulation as it is, and they can only be sold to law enforcement personnel by state statute. Pardon?
I think we know that about
Okay.
Massachusetts.
Well, we have some documentation indicating that they would be sold back to the Falmouth Police Department. I'm just curious if any of the other board members have considered the fact that with budgeting and training, that these are identical, only older, to the weapons that they just took on, and it will afford officers on their own time to train and stay proficient, whereas they might not be able to otherwise on their own time at a prescribed facility, as you will. I am a big proponent of staying trained up, and I think that this will give the officers, at least of Falmouth, the assurance that they can go out and train anytime they want at a regulated facility. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. I would also add to Mr. Brown's comments that it's incumbent upon the town manager, but also in collaboration with the police chief. And they're both positions that we have people in place for that I think would help us with that enforcement. But I think it's a really good question.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think it's important to recognize that, the board doesn't enforce anything. We rely on staff. And so that's a trust. And, and if we see that that trust has been broken, then of course we can act. But at this point, I trust our staff to do, to execute the policies that we set out.
Any other questions or comments about this policy from the board?
No.
Any comment from the public? Ms. Bumpus, we'll start with you.
Catherine Bumpus, Precinct 1. It is about trust. And it's about trust, and it's about what happens later on. And this is an opportunity that the town of Falmouth has to say, we could do something more, to say we think that the gun violence in this country is too much. And we don't want to put assault weapons that used to belong to the town of Falmouth on the street in any way, whether they go to police officers' homes, and then they can get sold later. They could get sold out of state. Other things could happen with them. We have the opportunity as a community, and I think that it was, as Barb Schneider said last time you talked about this, talked about at town meeting, that people wanted something more than just saying, we'll take care of it. They want to make a statement about what happens with these weapons and that they should not go back out into the community. The chief and I disagree on this. I would feel more comfortable with fewer guns in the world. That's how I come at the world. I would be happier if there were less of them. I think that these weapons were designed for law enforcement. They were designed for the military. They shouldn't be anywhere else. I wish our police department didn't need them. I would like to live someplace where we didn't. The chief believes we do. We should have them. What we do with them when we're done, the police department is done with them, really matters. He says they are not safe to use for the police department anymore. Why would we put them in the hands of even a police officer in their private lives? So I would like to say that they would be destroyed in this policy. I would like that to be the first choice. I think that when you get into the disposal conversation in the next agenda item, it's really unfortunate that an agreement has been reached where that's not happening, even though there was some push and some interest in that happening from the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Doobie?
I hand these out to the board member.
Yes.
I can pass them down.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. What you're going to be reading there is a report from a group called the Police Executive Research Forum. This is a group of law enforcement professionals. And it is a report that's kind of shocking. It's on suicide in police departments and the epidemic proportions. And if you turn to page 3, you're going to see some highlighted area down at the bottom. It says that we know that the number of officers who die by suicide each year in the United States, 167 verified suicides, this is 2018 incidentally, exceeds the number who are killed feloniously or accidentally. So that means either in the commission of a crime or they were killed in a traffic stop by an automobile. Suicides exceed that in the police department. If you turn to the next page and you'll see highlighted, risk of suicide among police officers is 54% greater than among American workers in general. So I'm sort of perplexed at a board member who would say, let's sell what everybody calls assault weapons, but I don't. Let's sell this type of weapon to a group of people who are 54% more prone to suicide than the rest of the workforce in the United States, and then justify that to me. I understand Mr. Zielinski's point that practice does make perfect. These men and women are able to practice enough to make them proficient. Giving them weapons in a high-stress occupation like the police department that has a record that is stated by one of its own organizations as incredibly prone to suicide, much more so than the general population. What's the rationale for giving them the opportunity to purchase weapons for their personal use? In essence, these weapons are going to be in their home. Don't forget that everything that you're talking about, safety around children, you're taking a military-grade weapon and putting it in the home of officers who have family, officers who are, I'm going to say this for the last time, more prone to taking their own lives than certainly any member of the board here or anybody else in the workforce in Falmouth. So what other workforce in Falmouth would you feel good about selling a firearm to, a legal firearm to? Is there any other workforce that you can conceivably think of that you would say it's okay to sell a weapon to that group, especially a group that's prone to suicide? And I would await a response so that I could feel good. I want the chief to get all the weapons that he needs. If the chief had come and said, we need $186,000 for weapons for the police department, I would have voted for it. This makes absolutely no sense at all, none whatsoever. These weapons should be destroyed. They should never take the chance of winding up in public hands again, and certainly not in the hands of people who are prone to suicide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doobie. Mr. Finneran?
Mark Finneran. Everybody speaks about gun violence, and it is an issue, but if you look at it, well, over 97% of the gun violence that you refer to on the streets or whatever is committed by people who aren't licensed and aren't supposed to have arms to begin with. You're talking about restricting arms sales to the police who have arms anyway. And I mean, as far as your suicide question, the rate for dentists is like the highest in the country, much higher, many times higher than the rate for police officers. You should be trying to keep the guns out of the hands of dentists. It would be more effective. Whoever gets hold of these firearms is going to be a licensed dealer, and they're going to sell them according to the laws of the state. I'm sorry, I think this has all been kind of a bit of a waste of time. And to even consider destroying something that technically belongs to the taxpayer, who is burdened enough already, is foolish. I mean, half of these firearms, they're considered assault weapons because they might have a bayonet lug or whatever, you know. Most of the people that buy these arms, they're like hot rodders. I mean, they're going to go home and they're going to modify them. I mean, you could take some of these pieces off and make them completely legal. And in many states they are. I'm sorry to say it, but wasting our time, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Finneran. Mr. Brown?
I'd just like to comment that I think that I'm not really familiar with law enforcement practices, but I think it's pretty common for law enforcement to have the option to purchase their weapons. And I think that it's just one more thing that we would be taking away from our own Falmouth police officers to have an option to purchase back the gun that they're accustomed to using and to have it for their own training or for their own protection of their homes. It's just one more insult to add to what we pile on to the police officer's job, and taking away one more thing and just making Falmouth one more reason to not want to come work here as a police officer. So that's my thinking on it. And I agree with your point that it would be great if nobody wanted them and they were getting destroyed. But if our own officers want to buy these weapons, I don't want to take that opportunity away from them. And I don't feel nervous about them sitting at having these weapons at their house. I think they're the most trained people that are capable of handling the weapons. So that's my feeling on it. That's how I can justify this position.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes, I grew up on a farm. We had weapons to take care of any number of different pests of different types, protect our livestock. And to me, having the guns is part of my growing up years. So if a police officer wanted to take their life, they don't need a military-grade weapon to do that. They must have plenty of other opportunities. So I find your argument to be kind of academic. There are plenty of places. I feel much worse that there are so many policemen that do commit suicide. I wish we could provide, and I think our police chief actually does provide counseling to police officers to try to make sure they feel comfortable with their lives and their sense of worth. But I find your argument to be somewhat weak, and I don't support it.
Any other comments from the board or comments from the public? Yes, please.
Just got some quick thing here. My name's Trish Mullen, and I am from Falmouth. And I believe that every American deserves a safe place to live. Last month, the New England Journal of Medicine reported that gun violence has overtaken auto accidents as the leading cause of childhood deaths in America. Meanwhile, activists have just shown an intransigence to make any meaningful progress to protect our children. The disposition of our Falmouth Police Department's old weapons is an opportunity to make a small but meaningful difference in the trajectory of the tragedy of children dying from guns. Guns no longer useful to the police department should be destroyed. Falmouth Select Board has both the power and the responsibility to be a leader to make a safer America for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments from the police department? Sergeant Guthrie?
Sergeant Guthrie, Falmouth Police. I'm also the lead firearms instructor for our department, as well as I'm a lead and firearms instructor for our local academy. So I take training very seriously. It's something I've done my entire career. Mr. Dubie's reference to police officer suicide, I feel is irresponsible. We, as supervisors in the police department and the chief, take that very seriously, and we are constantly assessing our officers. And I have personally, as a supervisor, had to take an officer's firearm away from them because of concerns that they may harm themselves. That was their sidearm, not an assault rifle, patrol rifle, assault weapon, shotgun. It was a sidearm. That's what police officers tend to use when they harm themselves. I didn't hear a statistic there, Mr. Doobie, for assault rifles, maybe I missed it, being used in those suicides. I also appreciate you bringing that to the public's attention because it is a very serious matter. I would have also appreciated your attendance at our memorial ceremony, which we had during Police Week. I didn't see you there. That's something that we do, that we honor all of the fallen police officers who have harmed themselves in the line of duty. So we do take it very seriously. And I think that this process is a fair process. I think it's what we've gone through here is something that can assure the public that we do take public safety very seriously. And we are willing, as members of the police department, to ensure that by purchasing these from a licensed vendor in accordance with law. Any questions from the board?
I have one quick question that might be a tad bit outside the scope of this conversation, but I'm always sort of curious, and there was something in the Cape Cod Times that the Dennis Police Department is doing, and I'm wondering if the Falmouth Police Department has the clinical support that they need.
That is something that the chief is working on. We do have provisions in the recent contracts and through the MPTC, which is the agency that governs all of our training. We do have wellness seminars and training. So that is something that the chief has been pursuing also.
Thank you, and I'm sure we'll look at that again. It was just a thought that I had.
I also would like to reiterate something that was mentioned earlier about training. And I really appreciate the comments and the compliments that we received earlier about how we handled the North Falmouth incident. Those assault rifles, patrol rifles, are something that we used as a tool to bring that situation to the best conclusion that we could. We didn't have any control over some of those circumstances, but what we did have control over, we successfully were able to deal with that situation. Because of the training of our officers, and as Selectman Zelensky had said earlier, that by these officers purchasing these firearms, it'll enable them to be able to do training on their own. And that is something that we encourage them to do with their sidearms, which is their pistols. We tell them all the time. I tell them all the time as the instructor, one of the instructors, that it doesn't just stop the 2 days that we go to the range every year with the department. They have to do this themselves, repetition, 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 just like any sport that you play, any other acquired skill that you do. You have to build that repetition and that muscle memory in order to be able to respond in a highly stressful situation. Because when you are in a gunfight, then everything else kind of goes out the window and you rely on your instincts and your training. And this is what, you know, we would like to try and facilitate for our officers, is encourage them to be able to go in on their own and continue their training.
Thank you. Chief Dunn?
Hi, Edward Dunn, Police Chief. I just want to assure the board, and I also want to assure the citizens of Falmouth. As a police chief, I was president of Mass Chiefs last year. Police suicide has been in the forefront of police chiefs across the country for several years. It's been a growing number, and we take it very serious. That being said, in our department alone, we are working with the men and women to make sure that they are mentally sane and sound. We just recently negotiated with some contracts, mental health checkup. They just have to go speak to somebody. I don't want to know what they spoke about. I just want to know they went. And we also have some other programs that we're working on. And again, thank you for noticing the outcome. Yes, that was a sad situation, but the outcome was the best situation we could have. Even after that, we have clinicians come in and meet with the officers involved in that. And they meet and they talk what happened and how they feel. So we take it very, very serious to keep our officers healthy and safe.
Thank you, Chief Dunn.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this draft policy? Mr. Dubey?
I'm sorry that that appeared academic to you. It appeared quite real to me. And just by way of education, and I completely agree with Sergeant Guthrie as far as what happens in a gunfight. As a personal note, in 1966 and 67, I served in Southeast Asia, and I was in a gunfight almost every single day for 14 months. I know what it's like. I know what you feel like after a gunfight. I know what training for a gunfight is like. I know what it's like after you're done with your service and you're no longer going to be in gunfights. And it takes a long time to acclimate to a real-world situation. The wonderful job that the police force did at North Falmouth was the result, as Chief Dunn and Sergeant Guthrie said, of hours of training. My understanding is that these officers did not have these weapons at home to train with. And I'm sure Sergeant Guthrie can correct me if I'm wrong. But if they didn't have these weapons at home to go and train with whenever they wanted, it seems to me that their training was pretty darn good because they handled an incredibly difficult situation the way I think every police department in this country would point to and say, that's the way you handle that situation, without the benefit of having their own personal firearms to train with. So I'm once again trying to figure out how you balance this, how you can possibly just come up with a one-size-fits-all solution. Yes, I understand Mr. Brown's point. Yes, one more thing that we're doing to the police force that prevents the possibility of people coming here to work on the police force. But then you weigh that against the fact that, yes, these guns can wind up in private hands because they can be resold. So it's not a simple cut and dry thing that I am against the Falmouth Police Department, because I am not. I'm wholeheartedly behind the Falmouth Police Department. But there is a risk factor involved here that you have to weigh. And you can't simply say that I want these officers to practice, let's give them the guns, let's give them access to these guns. And there's no possibility that anything that we haven't thought of will occur with these weapons. It's just, you can't do that. So I think it has to be a very active deliberation before you can decide that, yes, let's sell these weapons to the Falmouth Police Department for their officers to use for their own personal use. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dubey. Comments from the board?
Madam Chair, I don't know if Mr. Dubey is aware that he can go to any gun shop in Massachusetts right now, and there are assault rifles for sale only to active police duty. So these same officers could go tomorrow to whatever gun store they wanted and buy their own AR.
Okay, we're not going to have the conversation back and forth. Mr. Dubey, you had your opportunity. And so I want to bring the board back and refocus them on the policy and whether they are ready or prepared to move the policy, or if they need more time.
I'm ready. Was there a motion for this policy already? I think we did.
No, we did not. I don't believe on this policy we did not.
I would like to move that we approve this policy.
Second Mr. Patterson's motion.
All those in favor signify by... I'm sorry? Go ahead. Come up to the podium, please.
I appreciate all the concern about this really important question. My question remains as far as whether the preference is required or optional. And you said you would address that when we got to this point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, as Mr. Johnson-Staub said, the wording there is very carefully done. And when we were drafting this policy, I raised a concern because the Second Amendment protects not just the right to buy guns, but also to sell them. So firearms dealers have just as much of a Second Amendment right as do gun owners. And I worded it like this to draw back from it placing a requirement on the gun dealers to only sell them to law enforcement, because I believe that that might be an infringement on their Second Amendment right. So it's written as a preference and not a requirement.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve this policy. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. All right. Acting as trustees of the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund, consider approval of application from Falmouth Housing Corp. for $100,000 to secure permanent deed restriction to preserve affordability of one existing single-family house located on 51 Esker Place. We have 10 minutes for this.
Yeah, we had an item for, I mentioned it briefly in my preliminary report, but we have the item status on the disposition of weapons. So the board has addressed the policies.
Yes.
And if you would like, I can sort of recap what I stated earlier in terms of the status.
Yes, your recommendation, please. Sorry, I missed that.
No problem. So, the board had asked for some clarification as to where we were with the status of the purchase of new weapons and disposition of the existing rifles. And what I mentioned earlier is that the chief understood he did have the authority to proceed. A purchase order was issued to purchase the new weapons, and that was part of a procurement, part of a quote process that did include trade-ins. We've provided to the board all of the backup information about the research that was done to identify the value of the surplus weapons. With the board's agreement, we are ready to proceed with that purchase order. We do have a commitment from the supplier that was the low bid for the net cost of the purchase of the new weapons and the trade-in of the surplus weapons, and that's Powderhorn, and Powderhorn has provided a letter committing to sell these weapons only to members of local law enforcement. Happy to take any questions that the board may have.
Any questions from the board?
I appreciate the information being in the packet. I don't really have any further questions myself.
I had a question. And maybe I'm just not understanding the quotes. There's a quote from February 2nd, that says it has market values. Then there's another quote from March 2nd that has the same rifles but different market values. And I wanted to understand the difference between these two quotes and the month difference.
Madam Chair, could we have Sergeant Guthrie respond to that question?
Absolutely.
So you were referring to a quote that was submitted?
Yeah, February 1st from Greg Coleman, Powderhorn. For example, it says that 18 Colts were $700 per rifle. But then
That was an error on his part. That was supposed to be, well, I'm sorry, that's not an error. That's the true market value or an estimated market value of it. That
I see.
the very first that Powderhorn had provided was, they had come to the station, they had inspected the weapons, we had sent them pictures, and so I know, I think at one point he had sent one that had trade-in value on it, and I asked him, I said, this is what you want for trade-in? And what you want to give us for trade-in? He said, oh, no, I'm sorry, that's the market value.
I see.
So
Okay.
that is what he had provided. I had also, there's other, venues out there that you can get these. I know that Mr. Doobie had talked about the market values and the trade-in values, and we discussed this in the previous meetings. He had also talked about them being less valuable than what the Powderhorn provided, and there's other websites and stuff that can verify it. TrueGunValue.com, and this one here is from gunbroker.com. I mean, there's various things that we're able to confirm and kind of sure up what Powderhorn had given us, because we didn't want to just go on what they were telling us. We want to make sure we were doing what we were supposed to be doing.
Thank you.
You don't need a vote on that, do you? I didn't think so as a status update. Thank you. Okay, now we can go on to acting as trustees. What you want public, okay, go ahead.
This part of the process, in my mind, was flawed from the beginning. When the warrant was presented to town meeting originally, there was a cost breakdown. Some $86,000 to $86,234. And the breakdown on that was, for the rifle, $71,060, slings and swivels, $2,290, magazine pouches, $3,600, and magazines, $1,444. Now, there were optics and there were lights that were also purchased, that were called for in the warrant, okay? Those optics and lights were included in the $71,060. That's what the warrant called for. That's what town meeting approved, $71,060. Mr. Johnson, Staub, and I have gotten into a number of discussions about bid splitting. When it came time, as far as the bid was concerned, it was brought back to you, the cost of the rifles was $31,000, approximately. That's because the cost of optics and the cost of lights had been taken out of that $71,000. And according to Mr. Johnson Staub, that is a textbook example of bid splitting. You had an approved amount of $71,060. And then when it came time to have these rifles purchased, to stay under the $50,000 limit, which would have called for mandatory IFPs, am I correct, Mr. Johnson Staub? A $50,000 limit would have necessarily mandated IFPs, publication on com.by, publication in a newspaper of local jurisdiction. Am I correct?
There is a $50,000 threshold in the law. That's
right.
Correct.
So if the amount was $71,060 that was approved by town meeting, why was that threshold not enforced?
So I was not involved in reviewing this for procurement purposes. Our procurement process is decentralized to the departments, but I would say that just because a town meeting article has a dollar amount on it, that doesn't drive the way the procurement is handled. So it may be appropriate to do it in one procurement, it may be appropriate to do it in two procurements. If the supplier of the optics is cheaper from a different supplier, then that would not appropriately be part of the same procurement.
Then that would not be bid splitting.
These are accessories.
Again,
they're part of the initial purchase price.
It depends on, there are a lot of factors that have to be looked at in terms of what's the way for the town to get the best value. And
this seems to me to be a movable feast with bid splitting. When it comes to aggregation, the Inspector General has spoken to members of this committee and said that as far as firearms are concerned, all bets are off. You don't have to you don't even have to consider aggregation as far as that's concerned. Spoke to me and said that we have email that said that aggregation from Mr. Cohn that said that aggregation is merely a recommendation, has nothing to do with enforcement on 30B or the Inspector General's manual on 30B. So we're back to the same thing with you pick and choose what's bid splitting and what's not bid splitting.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So I did not speak to the Inspector General. I think there may be a difference between purchase and disposition. I don't know if you had a conversation with the Inspector General about we can disaggregate the purchase of weapons for the purposes of 30B when we are buying weapons.
I didn't, but the general conversation I had with the IG's office is that because firearms are such a unique commodity and they have their own very discrete marketplace. And the reason for that is because it's so heavily regulated. You cannot buy and sell firearms like you can anything else. And because of that, the IG's office instructed that public policy could overrule the strict letter of the law in 30B, and that as long as there was an adherence to a strong public policy and that the policy maintained the spirit of the law, that it would still be seen in compliance with 30B. So while I did not have a conversation specifically about bid splitting or purchase, I spoke with the IG specifically about disposition of surplus supplies instead. The theme is the same. Firearms are unique, and they don't fall into a neat category under Section 30B of the law.
So from that, may I understand, then I'll promise you I'll sit down. Do I understand that the aggregation that Sergeant Guthrie is talking about really is not necessarily something that must be followed? That what we have been saying from the beginning, that each rifle can be considered independently, that the $10,000 barrier has not been broken, because we don't have to aggregate those rifles. And I see Mr. Johnson-Staubish agreeing with me. They don't. So
we also don't have to, excuse me.
Go ahead.
We also don't have to adhere to the $10,000 limit. That's why we have a separate policy for the firearms, because of the latitude and the discretion of the board to craft that policy. So the firearms policy doesn't have a monetary limit, because there's discretion there as indicated by the Inspector General's office.
We want them to, but they don't have to.
Can I have side conversations, please? If you'd like to get up and speak at the podium, that's fine.
I will stand up. What I said to Rich was, the answer is, you are perfectly able, legally, with town council's opinion, to destroy the weapons, and you have chosen not to.
Thank you.
That is my take. I will say, on where we are with the bid, I did not do a formal FOIA request. I did request all the information and it was acknowledged that I had requested the information when this went out to bid and the responses, and I never received them from the town.
Sergeant Guthrie.
The numbers, excuse me, Sergeant Guthrie, again, Falmouth Police. The numbers that Mr. Doobie is referencing is something that was provided by Cape Gunworks as an estimate, as something that we can go to town meeting to be able to start that process and ask for a dollar amount to be able to buy them. That was, again, for Colt rifles. That was not for the actual rifles we bought. We were actually able to find a cheaper yet comparable rifle that is now custom made for us to be able to conduct the training for our officers, both lefty and righty-handed officers, which makes it more versatile for us. And those numbers that he was presenting, I had already told him on the phone when I advised him that Powder Horn had provided the letter that was requested before regarding the sale to local law enforcement. That was what he had originally said would satisfy his concerns. He then brought about this procurement process also. Once we realized that the rifles, not the optics were not part of that price. The optics are actually listed in there as a separate item. And the chief did go to different precinct meetings and had a breakdown of all the items to be able to speak to before town meeting. And I've also heard that the town meeting members have had some say into what happens with the disposition of the used rifles, the old rifles. There were a few members, including Mr. Doobie, that spoke up, but again, that was something that was not an overwhelming message. I'm hearing a lot of talk about there was a firm message and, you know, some interest and whatnot. There wasn't an overwhelming message. There were a few people that did speak up against it. So I feel like some of these comments that are being put out there by Mr. Doobie are exacerbated and exaggerated. We did get those optics from a state procurement list, which is part of the procurement law. I would have done the same thing with the lights if I could have. I'm, again, trying to do the best that I can to get the best bang for our buck, and I'll leave it on that.
Thank you.
Don't you wish? Nan Logan, still in Precinct 1, still thankful for this conversation. I really appreciate it. A couple short numbers. I speak for over 70 people to whom I presented the dilemma of what we do with these guns, and they all assured me that they would like to have them destroyed. I think I sent that list to the select board members at that point. Mr. Zielinski, you weren't there at that time. So on behalf of them, a couple numbers that I'd like you to think about. There are 43 states that do not regulate this type of military weapon being owned by private citizens. 43 states where private citizens can own these weapons that our police need and are very well trained to use, and I trust with my life, because I'm here, and you've got my life, and I've got your life, and we've got all that. In those 43 states, there are 20 of those states that do not require a permit to buy one of those guns. So also think about the current economic situation that we're in. Think about the fact that if you had something that was valuable and your family was having a hard time buying gas and your family was having a hard time getting child care, and you had this item, or perhaps you bought several of them, that you could trade back to a federal firearms dealer, and that federal firearms dealer could not sell to our citizens because our laws don't allow it. But that federal firearms dealer can sell that to any federal firearms dealer in any of those 43 states where a private citizen can own that. That's the decision that you're making. We're asking our police to have to make that decision so that they can support their families. I don't want to put that pressure on them. I'd like to see these guns destroyed, and you can do it.
Mr. Finneran, and then Mr. Ridley.
Really, Nancy?
I said, what's the matter, Catherine? I said Ridley instead of Ripley. Go ahead, Mr. Finneran.
Hi, Mark Finneran again. I grew up in one of those 43 states. I got my first firearm for my 7th birthday, and I, like all my friends who had numerous guns, respected them and never killed anyone. But I think that these people want these guns destroyed. I, as a taxpayer, don't because of their monetary value, but I suggest that perhaps they could buy them and then arrange to have them destroyed, and everyone would be happy.
They would have to have federal firearms licensing.
Mr. Ripley?
I didn't plan to speak tonight, but Bob Ripley, Precinct 9. So I think we're actually talking about the procurement. And, these gentlemen, they risk their life every day for us. And at town meeting, we gave them, voted on a certain dollar amount. And then they had to go out and get it. And how many weeks have we been having this discussion now? It would be a shame if they didn't get the equipment that they need to protect us. They're buying this equipment to protect us. So I hope to God that they haven't been waiting for us to make a decision to protect our community, because that's what they're doing. We're not talking about destroying guns. We already worked on that one. So we're talking about the procurement. So as a taxpayer, we voted the money. I don't really care how many bids it takes. They've already said they're going out to get the best price. That works for me as a taxpayer, and they're protecting me every day. So let's let them do their job, continue to protect us, and let's get the guns to our police department. Thank you.
Any other comments on the status update? Okay. We will move on to acting as trustees of the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund. Consider approval of the application from the Falmouth Housing Corp. for $100,000 to secure permanent deed restriction to preserve affordability of one existing single-family house located at 51 Esker Place. And I see we have Linda Clark here.
Good evening. Linda Clark, President of Falmouth Housing Corporation. I think you have a little bit of history on the affordable house that we actually rehabbed after an expensive eviction. We actually have put into the home about $154,000 in renovations in order to bring it up to a level of sale, which included a septic system, very expensive. We had to basically gut the house, appliances, kitchen, baths, flooring, subflooring. It was quite a disaster. In the meantime, we've discovered that when the house was purchased by Falmouth Housing Corporation back in 2007, previous President Bob Murray, it was purchased due to the fact that the house was going into foreclosure. The original purchaser, as an affordable home, the home was going into foreclosure. The town did not have the ability to find another person that met the criteria as far as affordability to buy the house, and the house sat for a little bit of time. Bob Murray stepped to the plate and said, I will purchase the house, although I'm going to need to rent it. And as you know, these deed restrictions do not allow rentals. The town agreed. What are we going to do with this house? We're not going to leave it vacant. At that point, the town offered $85,000 towards the purchase of the home, with $42,500 due back the town upon the sale when there was a qualified buyer. In the meantime, we rented the home. So here we are today. The deed is expired, so there was no affordability attached to the home any longer. So we have put the house back into a restricted deed, and it's part of the LIP program. It's in perpetuity. It will always stay in the SHI, in the inventory, and we're looking for a little bit of help here. So we're looking for a grant of $100,000. $42,000 of that $100,000 will go back to the town, as promised, from an MOA that dates way back. There's nothing at the Registry of Deeds. And we have a mortgage on the home at $73,000. So we're looking for some help from the town for $100,000 for the home. We do have a buyer currently, a single mom, and she meets the criteria, the 80% AMI. And here we are.
Any comments?
I think this is an easy one.
Yeah.
That would be my comment. The only other thing I would mention is, it's noted in my memo, but for the public, the net cost to the fund is going to be $57,500, because $42,500 is going to be paid back by the Falmouth Housing Corp to the fund. And when that memo of agreement was entered into back in 2008, seven, I believe that predated the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund. So I did just want to state for the record that the $42,500 will be deposited into the one and only Town of Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund, which is the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund.
Madam Chair, a question for Peter. I'm coming in on the back end of this, but is there any relief from adjudication from the person that was in there? That they said that there was an eviction and there was damages done, is that correct?
Correct.
There was no adjudication with any kind of relief monetarily?
From the tenant?
Yes.
Yes, I have a 20-year money judgment.
Okay.
That's not going to last. That's
record.
For the record.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Patterson?
I'd like to make the motion if I could. I move that the board, acting as trustees of the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund, authorize the town manager to execute a commitment letter setting forth the terms of a financial award to the Falmouth Housing Corp. In the amount of $100,000 to secure a permanent deed restriction to preserve the affordability of an existing single-family house located at 51 Esker Place.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Linda.
Thank you for your work, Linda.
Okay, next on our list, to consider changes to select board meeting schedule. Does everyone have a copy of the current schedule versus the proposed revised schedule? Any questions around that?
No?
Looks like we would meet in June on the 6th. We would have a joint meeting on the 13th. We would have June 20th off because it's Juneteenth, and then we would meet again on the 27th.
Madam Chair, I would just, as a reminder, for your calendars, I'm sure you already are aware, but you also have the Mayflower Public Forum on June 8th. So it is going to be a busy month of June.
Can't wait.
Do I have any concerns around this proposed schedule? And do we need to vote it?
I suggest that
Since it's a
we
change.
do the extra work, and it'll help us get caught up on our business.
Second. If that's a motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll accept that, the revised schedule. Okay, the review of Select Board liaison assignments.
So I'd like to start off by saying that the Transportation Committee has been, I think, unhappy with the Select Board's action or lack of action on their initiatives. They've done a lot of work. They meet every 2 weeks, and they've got a lot of great ideas. And admittedly, we have not really addressed their recommendations sufficiently. And as the liaison, I feel like I'm partly responsible, or, a lot responsible. And if somebody else would want to take on the challenge of taking that on, I did throw that out to the committee, that I was going to offer to, maybe get a new liaison to their committee, if anybody's interested. I will say it's a bit of work, if anybody's up to the challenge. Otherwise, I'm happy with all the other committees. I think that they're satisfied with my attendance, and I'm not looking to change any other ones.
Is now an appropriate time to discuss what our roles are again in these committees, just to refresh? Would that be appropriate under this agenda item?
Good.
Okay.
It's also outlined in the committee handbook, the role of the liaison.
I think for the public, it would be good to just kind of say that our role is to attend the meetings and liaise between the board, provide suggestions and feedback on ideas, and bring appropriate ones to the board as we think is appropriate.
Absolutely, and that we don't vote and that we really aren't there to influence conversations.
Right. The primary role is to explain the interaction and facilitate the delivery of their work to the select board.
And share information that might be useful to them in their deliberations.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'll say, Mr. Zelinski, if you are interested in the Zoning Board of Appeals,
I'll take it.
I will give that to you. And in the assumption that you would take over Megan, Miss English Braga's committees, I'd be happy to trade you the Zoning Board for Agricultural Commission.
You got it.
If that schedule works for me. Great.
Madam Chair?
Fine.
Thank you.
I would ask that I no longer will participate in the Affirmative Action Committee, and I would like to also move the Human Services Committee. So if anyone is willing to take on either of those, that would be greatly appreciated.
I would be happy to do Human Services. What would you like to trade it for? You can't have affordable housing.
Nothing. I'm actually trying to cut back a little bit because, as I learned from Doug, the role of the chair is
demanding.
Far more.
Oh, you mean you're going to be busy?
Intensive.
Yeah, okay. No problem. I will add Human Services Committee to mine.
Thank you. And would anyone like to take the Affirmative Action Committee?
I am not interested in that committee. Yes. I don't,
Yes. And given its status at this point, I am no longer eligible to be the liaison for the Affirmative Action Committee. So we will, if no one
Is that committee still
asks for it, we'll assign it.
meeting?
Not right now.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. Patterson?
I'm happy with the ones I have. I'm very reluctant to take anything more on, honest to goodness. I mean, the EDIC is very busy, as well as Conservation Commission. So
you're
I'm
pleased
happy
with your assignments?
I'm happy with those assignments. I can't make all the meetings, but because of the conflicts that we have. But I'm happy to stick with those, and I feel like I've provided them with a liaison that works for them. And if they complain about it, I'd be happy to discuss changing.
Do you see any on Megan's list that are troublesome for you or not really your field of interest?
Oh. No, I mean, listen, there's a lot of them, and we have to split them up. And, baptism by fire, all of that. So I'll take on what I have, make it work.
And as we move forward, if you find out that your work schedule doesn't allow you to meet on some of these and you want to revisit it, we can always come back and switch it up.
Well, it also says attend meetings or read the notes. So if you need to stay up on the minutes if you can't make a certain meeting.
And I spoke to Megan about some of her old ones. She said that I could bounce some of the procedural stuff off of her anytime, so.
Okay.
Excellent.
Not once I'm there, getting my feet wet in it.
Right.
Okay.
I think I've let all of my committees know that if there's a particular meeting they want me to attend, to email me, and I can work it into my schedule with enough notice. And that's how I plan to continue moving forward.
Excellent. Okay, so the only one that we have unassigned is affirmative action, and we can talk about that. All right. We have our consent agenda done. We did our administrative orders. Review and vote to approve minutes of meetings. Public session, January 31st, April 4th, April 25th, May 9th.
See, I've reviewed them, just taking to see. Need to see.
I have some edits.
All right. Do you have edits for the meeting of Monday, January 31st?
I do.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
I'm wondering, under proclamation, where it describes Briggs's project, it doesn't say where the project was clearing the bush. I think that was at Nobska. I might be misremembering the project, but,
No, that's a different
well, okay.
scout.
Okay, so that's my point. We should put in there where his project was located, which I hope he said that in the meeting. Maybe not, I don't know. Okay. And then
January
everything else, basically, at some point, we started doing Miss, Mr., Doctor in front of the names. And
I had that on mine as well.
Okay, and I noticed that was
as
missing.
an edit. To me, I think we do, I don't like the way it presents when it just says English Braga O'Keefe.
Yeah, the titles, it's on the other ones.
Yeah. And the other piece that I questioned on January 31st was North Falmouth Elementary School has a sprinkler problem. Until replaced and fixed, the school will not be able to operate. I'm not sure that that's accurate.
It was, I remember it being said at the meeting, and it wasn't until after the meeting we learned that it had.
It's not accurate, exactly.
It was
So
not accurate.
we need to adjust that.
It was said.
Just strike it.
I think we should strike it out.
Okay.
Yes. Anything else on the 31st?
No, I would move approval and release for public access, as edited.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain.
Thank you. April 4th?
Let's see. Yeah. I found them to be essentially accurate, so I would move approval and release for public access.
I have a second to Mr. Patterson's motion.
Sorry, I want to make sure I'm looking at the right ones.
It's just a two-pager.
Yeah, that's a short one.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll abstain, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. 4-1. April 25th.
Right. I have a couple of edits. Let's see, on page 2, under Town Manager's Preliminary Report, we just have a typo there. That should, the very last line should be Peterson 1T Farm. On page 3, and these are pretty small typos. Let's see, the next to the fourth from the bottom paragraph that starts with Jerry Patamas, the last sentence says, simple math is likely, and I would say there's two is's in there. If we drop the second one, it would read properly. And let's
Sorry, which paragraph is that?
I'm sorry, it's on page 2, page 3, the fourth paragraph from the bottom, that is where the paragraph starts with Jerry Patamas.
Thank you.
And then also the next paragraph, the second line, it says Trish Favuli, and then it says Miss Fafuli. So I think it's spelled incorrectly the second time.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I have a page 4. You have anything on page 4?
I do not. Go for it.
On page 4, under 4, it says hearing note read by Miss Scott Price. It should be hearing notice.
I have an edit on page 7, if anybody else has one.
No.
Just a question, I couldn't remember exactly, and the context wasn't obvious to me, but there's a large paragraph in the center, and in the middle of that paragraph, it says, last year was it says it's 800, but the comma's in the wrong place. I assume it was 8,000 runners.
Yeah.
Right.
So we should, it's been, and then on the very last paragraph on that same page, page 7, all from Falmouth, with the exception of, it says 250, but I think it was 2,500. I thought it was a larger number than 250 that was mentioned.
Oh, that was if they capped it at 10,000 with the 6,000 deferred plus the 3,500, then it was only going to leave 250 for Falmouth runners, whatever that math was. So I think that's right.
Okay, fine, I'll defer to your memory. At the bottom of page 8, a minor typo in the first line of the last paragraph, Jim Pysick stated the impact of the runners is in the community, and should be is a community event. Stated impact of the runners in the community is a community event. I don't know, I couldn't make that.
That doesn't make sense.
No,
The
it doesn't make any
sentence
sense to
doesn't
me.
make sense.
I think you can get away with just striking the sentence.
I agree.
Okay, fine, that sounds good to me.
On page 11.
Go for it.
On page 11, at the bottom of the italics from the town manager, the last paragraph, Ms. Scott Price asked, that I think should not be in italics, because that's not part of
Agreed.
the
Right.
That needs to be,
statement.
the formatting just carried over too far, but that does not belong in the italicized section.
I think this was 13 pages of minutes, and it was done very well.
Yes, indeed, right. So unless anybody else has another edit, I would move approval and release for public access.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Stay. Let's see, we have the open meeting on May 9th. And there are a few edits on that, but
Yes, it's on the back.
on,
So, I'm sorry, we on May 9th? Open
okay, May 9th, okay? On page 4, under 2, the administrative orders, and under the action, Miss English bracket, motion approval of administrative order, says B through G, but we have A through G there. Is there a reason why the vote to retroactively approve application?
Yes. Yes, that was withdrawn.
That was withdrawn. So it is correct then. Okay, thank you. And then on the next page, page 5, under public hearings, number 1, and the second paragraph, I got to the last sentence and it just didn't make any sense. You would have another service system with its own assessment. It is not equitable or feasible to add 21 houses to redistribute the project costs, was how I made sense out of it. So just adding that prepositional phrase. Does that make sense, Peter?
Yeah, I think you're going in the right direction.
To redistribute the project cost.
Yeah. To add, I think the point there was to, if we were to add 21 houses at the same flat amount that was charged to the original properties that were assessed a betterment, that would not be feasible.
So that's why I put the prepositional phrase in there, to redistribute the project cost. That's how it made sense to me. I'll defer to your judgment, though.
We'll clean that up.
Okay. On page 7, in the middle of the page, there says unidentified individual. In lieu of the fact, it seems like we ought to be able to come up with a name. And does anybody know, signed after this discussion,
I think that's probably Mr. Doobie.
Yeah, I guess it was. So the intent of the board at the time has to do with the same item we've discussed this evening.
Does sound like Richard Doobie.
I guess somebody could review the tapes.
Yeah, we'll check that.
Please. And then on page 8, number 4 says, discussion and vote on Falmouth Road Race Incorporated appeal of the decision of the town manager regarding the number of participants for the Falmouth Road Race special event. There's nothing in there that really explains what was covered. So I thought we should add a parenthetical phrase, see action item under announcements section of the minutes, because that's where it's actually discussed. Either that or it just gets dropped. the action is actually recorded.
Yeah, they're actually, right. There was no discussion because it had already been addressed, so it...
Right.
Right, there wasn't really an appeal.
Right. Can we just renumber and take it out? Anyway, that's, it's just, there's nothing there in the way of action. And it wasn't done in at that point in the meeting, so.
I would suggest we simply add a sentence that says this matter was addressed at the beginning of the meeting.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, and then on page 9, the paragraph, I guess it's third paragraph down, analysis of summary evaluation. If you read that first sentence, it seems to me there's an extra line put in there. It really should be continued so that it would say, the summary evaluation report, with the exception of the first of the 4 summary paragraphs, included universally negative comments selected from, and I would say, the board members' evaluations, and I guess it should be members with a apostrophe, possessive. But I think we need to close that sentence up because it's not formatted well. That makes sense? Okay, and then on page 10, if everybody's following me along, the last paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, it starts off, she has a job with the trial court. And I think we just need to make a separate paragraph and say, Ms. Braga said she now has a job with the trial court.
Yep.
It's just, okay. And that's my last edit, of trying to make sense of the minutes. So does anybody else have a change? I'll be happy to make a motion. I move that we approve the minutes of Monday, May 9th, 2022, as edited and released for public access.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the last one we have is executive minutes of May 9th. And I don't want to, of course, get into the details because it's not timely to release this. But if you, I think I can do this, but if you look, let's see, under the present via telephone section, this page, the very first page, the paragraph that says Attorney Moscos.
Yeah.
In the middle sentence, I think we need an of, negotiations of revenue to the town. And then the last sentence needs to be dressed up too. And I'm being circuitous for a reason.
So you're making that into one sentence and eliminate the capitalization of revenue?
Yeah.
I got you.
Okay. And if no one else has any comments or corrections, I would move approval as edited and not released for public access.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, Town Manager Supplemental Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned earlier, the Mayflower Public Wind Forum is scheduled for Wednesday, June 8th. That is at 6 p.m. in the Lawrence School. We have had a couple folks ask about being able to participate remotely. I'm afraid we don't have the technology or the staffing for that size of an event to have a hybrid meeting. So I don't know if the board wanted to suggest, or certainly staff can suggest on the board's behalf, that individuals who are not able to attend can submit their comments or questions in writing. I want to be careful not to promise that all comments will be read or all questions will be read. I think, priority will probably you'll probably want to give priority to folks who are present at the meeting, but if time allows and there are questions or comments that haven't been, pretty much heard already during the forum, perhaps we could have, those messages compiled and addressed at the forum, if that's your pleasure.
Sounds reasonable.
Yes, indeed.
At least it's an attempt.
Good idea.
Okay. And then lastly, I did want to mention a couple of things on the staffing and hiring front. As we know, all employers in the region and I think to some extent the country are very challenged to fill some of their positions, and that is certainly the case for the town of Falmouth. So I thought it might be helpful to give a periodic update on where we stand with filling some of our positions. And I will start with some good news. The position of Associate Town Council has been filled. We're thrilled to welcome Brian Tobin. He's going to be starting May 31st. He comes with 5 years of experience as Associate Town Council for the town of Needham. He has his law degree from the University of Maryland. So we're very happy to have filled that position, and I know
Ecstatic.
Maura is ecstatic to have some help. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer position has been advertised as directed by the board. We have not changed that job description because I understood the intent was to get that advertised as soon as possible with the existing salary that we have available. Certainly happy to entertain modifications to the job description as we go forward. We have a Recreation Program Director position. That's one of 3. The title is perhaps not clear in terms of the structure over there. So we have the Recreation Director, Joe Olenek, and he has 3 direct reports, and those positions are all called Recreation Program Director. So one of those positions has been vacant, and it was offered and accepted. And the start date is not yet confirmed, but that position was accepted May 16th. We have a GIS coordinator position that Bob Shea, I'm sad to say, is retiring. He has been a fabulous employee for the town, and really I think we're ahead of the curve on GIS for most communities our size, and Bob has just done a tremendous job. That position has been advertised, and I will say that at this point it looks like we may have some difficulty filling that position. So I will continue to keep you posted, and we're continuing to look at ways that we might fill that position, including, Bob has agreed to come back on a part-time basis as a consultant to assist us, but that's not going to be sufficient, so we're continuing to work on that position.
Just a question real quick. In a situation like that where it is highly technical and you really want somebody with experience, can we not use consultants to fill in the gaps when we have a situation like this?
Yeah, we may need to look at that.
Beyond Bob Shea.
Right. So, that's among the options that we may need to look at long-term. I think the best long-term solution is if we can find a qualified employee. I think we're going to get a better return on our investment that way. But you're absolutely right. That's an alternative that we can certainly look at. It may, we may need to move some money. That may require a town meeting vote, but it's certainly an option that we'll keep in mind.
I think that it's likely to be a very competitive skill, and that's why I just thought I'd ask that question.
The Assistant Town Planner position has been advertised with a preferred response date of June 10th, and the Human Resources Director position has been advertised with a preferred response date of June 14th. That concludes my staffing update and my supplemental report.
Thank you. Select Board reports?
Well, I think most of us went to the police department recognition ceremony.
Yeah, we were all,
everybody.
We were all there.
6 select board members were there.
That's right. That was just a great ceremony, and was glad to be able to participate. The Falmouth Affordable Housing Committee, I know Angie was there, met this past Thursday, and are very active, and they've sent us a letter giving some recommendations to us that we'll have to be addressing at another meeting. And then I mentioned already that I did get to attend Logan Muniz's Court of Honor yesterday. Redundant.
Yes. In addition to attending the police memorial service, I attended 2 different events on opioid use and overdose prevention, one hosted by Health and Human Services, another one was a community forum that was at St. Barnabas, that was held by Reverend Will of St. Barnabas and Rabbi Elias of the Jewish congregation. Really, really vibrant, good discussion about how to prevent overdoses, how to support somebody who's suffering from an overdose, and basically how to deal with it in our community. So I really enjoyed that as much as I think you can enjoy that type of thing. I also participated in the Walk for Hope this weekend, and it was really great to have Peter there on the team. Kim Fish, our new housing coordinator, participated as well. So it was really nice to see the local officials in the community and taking part in supporting. I should say the Walk for Hope is Housing Assistance Corporation raising funds to support their initiatives. Chair of the Affordable Housing Committee, Ed, was not able to attend. He recently had COVID, but he would have been there as well. So we had a lot of good support. They raised a lot of money, and it was a lot of fun. Something I should have mentioned several weeks ago, but I kept forgetting, was several months ago I asked about creating an onboarding packet for new board members, and Peter and Julian had worked on that. We do have that we can give to Mr. Zielinski.
You got one.
You got one already?
Yeah.
Peter presented with me this morning.
You have to sign for it, too.
Oh, nice. Nicely done. So I'm just really pleased about that. I think it'll be really great.
I was in it for 3 hours this afternoon.
Wonderful. And I have a very large network of GIS friends because I almost got a master's in GIS. So I will be sharing that with my networks, and hopefully we can get somebody in soon.
Super.
Great. Thank you.
I was happy to see in the search for the GIS, they're going to include LiDAR technology, which is something that we need to bring online. So very happy about that.
Any other reports?
I already reported that the Transportation Committee is looking for a resurgence in their work and revisiting, which we will be hopefully putting on our agenda in the near future and kind of recapping the work that they've done and see what we can do to implement some of it. Waterways Committee is moving steadily forward with their planning for additional new projects. I guess we want to talk about future agenda items, but that'll be after everybody's reports. So.
Okay, let's move on to future agenda items.
So I'd like to have a couple more policy discussions. I'd like to get back to the embarkation fee fund and whether or not we can come up with a policy for that. I don't know if there's any other work that needs to be done before we take that up. Last time we wanted to talk about it, there was some kind of complaint or some reason why we couldn't discuss it. If there are any barriers to that, then...
I think we had to resolve a complaint, didn't we?
I think we're prepared to have that conversation.
Okay, so that is one. Another one is, it just came up last week, but I guess it's been brewing for a while. The North Falmouth Village Association would like to have us discuss whether or not we can create a policy for implementing speed tables in neighborhoods, because I guess they've been asking for it for a while, and it has recently come to light that there should be a policy by the select board to deal with that. And another policy I'd like to consider, and I don't know if this is within the purview of the board, but I think that we are probably missing out on some hiring opportunities because we don't have any opportunity to offer work from home, remote work. And I'd like to know if that's something that you, as acting town manager, would entertain a policy from the board regarding that, or if that's something that, have you considered implementing that on your own?
That's a really important point. It is something that I'm prepared to act on. But let me clarify. I'm not prepared to act on it like right away.
Right.
It's something that we want to be really careful about and mindful of because it just raises complicated equity and union issues. But it is, I think that it's the direction that the labor market is moving, and I think we're going to need to closely examine it and see how we can be a more flexible employer. And I'll say right up front, one of the challenges that we will have is there are some kinds of work that lend themselves better to remote work than others. So that's one of the challenges, particularly in a union environment where unions typically like to have one size fits all. If you do it for one union member, you have to do it for all union members. So I haven't had any conversation with the union about that to this point, but it's, it's an area that I would like to explore.
Do we have any employees now who primarily work from home?
We don't have any permanent situations right now where employees are working from home. There are occasions where an employee is on a leave, a temporary leave of absence, medical leave, et cetera, where an accommodation is made to allow work from home.
So they're on a leave of absence, but they can work from home?
Right. So if there's, if someone is unable medically to be in the office and work, but they're medically able to be at home and work, that is a situation that we have been able to accommodate.
I'd like to hear more about that at some point.
So do you need any more direction from the board regarding the remote work policy, or is that something that you can take an initiative on?
Yeah, I think I'm going to need some time to work with attorneys and give some thought to it, and it needs to be bargained. So certainly we can have a dialogue in executive session about the development of such a policy.
Any other future agenda items from any board members? Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.